Welcome everyone, Hampstead Garden Suburb Lunch and Learn. I can't even believe it's the 20th of February. Well, last week we started the month of Adar. And good news, we've got 2 Adars this year, so Pesach isn't in, still we've got another 9 weeks to go. But we have this idea in Adar, that the rabbis tell us, Mishenichnas Adar marbim b'simcha. When the month of Adar comes in, we are supposed to increase in Simcha, which I'm not yet going to define exactly what Simcha is. I will shortly. We're just going to keep translating it as the word Simcha. I'm just going to give you an English word so you understand joy, happiness, something like that. But it's a very hard word to translate. So I found this rabbi, who used to be the rabbi in Yeshiva HaKotel, and he wrote a book in Hebrew, and he says, what does this mean? Well, how do we understand this? So he says, this is source 2 on your sheet. Kach masbirim chasidim shel es havoda shel chodesh adar. The chasidim, those pious people, doesn't mean people who live in Stamford Hill. It's like a word to use to express. I'm just serious. It's not. It's meant. Chasidim means people who are pious and ultra devout. What does it mean when we say the words Mishenichnas Adar marbim b'simcha? Hasimcha hi bitui shel spontaneous. If you don't know what that word is in Hebrew, it's spontaneity. V'shel hachofesh sheli. Joy is an expression, simcha is an expression of spontaneity and of my personal freedom. Odom merutza kshehu meshuchra ukeshetov lo es hatov hu mabit al yedei simcha va'al yedei shira. When a person is satisfied with their life, they feel unburdened and things are well with them, and the person can express their joy through. They can express their happiness through joy and through song. Now, I know myself that, maybe you don't do this, but I certainly go around singing to myself. And when somebody's like a bit miserable, they do a little bit less singing. Maybe am I the only person then who does think, okay, all right. So I'll just scratch that, okay. So I'm the only person, but I do, like some people, you can tell when like kids are sort of skipping and singing to themselves in the shower when they seem to be very happy with themselves. But how do we get to this level of happiness? What is happiness and what is simcha? Because it's Mishenichnas Adar marbim b'simcha. What does that mean? So there is a famous idea which Rabbi Nachman Mibreslev, who was the rabbi who was, I'm sure people have heard of him before. He passed away in 1810 in Ukraine. A lot of people are very into that. The Rav Nachman couple with the thing like that, with a little hair sticking out, like dress up on that poem. And he says in his book, sorry?
Looking at this, he was very young.
Very young.
38.
Unless I typed it wrong. I know, I'm serious. I didn't notice it before, but I will look it up. But it does seem very young, and that means he did a tremendous amount of influence, and his influence still exists all those years later. I don't think I typed it wrong, but I could have. It could be my mistake. It does seem exceptionally young, very young. And he says, perhaps people know the song, Mitzvah Gedola Lios B'Simcha. It is a great mitzvah to be B'Simcha Tomid, always to be B'Simcha, always to be happy. That isn't always possible, let's be honest. But Sorich lehiskaber ma'od b'chol hakochos laharchik ha'atzuvos v'hamora shachora v'liyos ach sameach tomid. And it's a great mitzvah. It's like a positive, he's saying it's a positive commandment to be happy all the time. And make yourself determined to keep away from, when the word in Hebrew, shachora, which is interesting, it's like black depression, and aim to constantly be happy. I'm not sure that's so possible to achieve it, but we can certainly try. V'hu refuah l'kol minei cholas, and it is the antidote to many illnesses. Ki kol minei cholas bo'in me atzuvos umara shachora v'tzarich l'samech atzmo b'chol minei ha'etzos. You've got to find ways. You've got to have novel ideas. Be resourceful to find ways to overcome sadness, because when a person is sad and a person is depressed, that can lead to other illnesses. Now, obviously, he wrote this when he wrote this, and today we've got a little bit of a better understanding about what is mental illness, and I'm not negating that at all. Of course, people who have mental illness have to get the right and the correct and appropriate help. But there has been a lot of research today saying if you try and sort of put yourself into the mindset of being happier. I don't know if I'm talking to the right age group, but when I grew up, there was a program on television called Ally McBeal, and there was one, and remember that character, and he just used to go like this, like, I forgot what his name is, right? And he just used to always do, now I'm going to make you all upset because you can't remember his name. Like, however angry anyone made him, he used to go like this, like. And it was like really weird, but the fact is, if you train yourself to say, I am not going to let things get me upset, it's harder than it looks. I'm not an expert at it. But I did find this public health research from 2019 from somebody from UCL, and his name's Andrew Steptoe, source 4 on the sheet. He says, research into the relationship between happiness and health is developing rapidly, exploring the possibility that impaired happiness is not only a consequence of ill health, but also a potential contributor to disease risk. And we have heard of loads of things like that. God forbid if somebody's had a bad diagnosis, if they've got a positive outlook and if they try their best to keep positive, that certainly can help. But the question is, how do we do that? And I can see there's grey on here, which doesn't make me happy. Sorry, I can see that I didn't notice it when I printed it, but can you see that where it says behavioural science is like, looks like it's like weird grey. Sorry, it's just don't worry about okay, you probably can't see it, but I can. I just like it to be perfect. So I will still be happy. Look at me. Okay, so I read this really interesting, because I was like looking a lot into things like what is happiness and how do we achieve happiness and where are we in the world and are we happy, and people try for happiness. And I read this comes from an article in The Guardian in 2014 written by Yuval Noah Harari, who is an Israeli author who wrote the book Sapiens and 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. I'm sure people have heard of him. And he says that he questions, like, are we happier today than people were in the Stone Age and the Iron Age, in the Middle Age or whatever? Obviously the Black Death time wasn't so great. And he says, does anyone want to read it, number 5? Anyone? Sarah's just there. Sorry.
Writing price for extortionate taxation. Printing, we got mass propaganda and brainwashing. Computers turn us into zombies. The harshest criticism of all is reserved the unholy trinity of industrialism, capitalism and consumerism. These 3 bugbears have alienated people from their natural surroundings, from their human communities and even from their daily activities. The factory worker is nothing but a mechanical cog, a slave to the requirements of machines and the interests of money. The middle class may enjoy better working conditions and many material comforts, but it pays for them dearly with social disintegration and spiritual emptiness. From a romantic perspective, the lives of medieval peasants were preferable to those of modern factory hands and office clerks, and the lives of Stone Age foragers were the best of all.
What do people think about that? We've had a lot of developments, all the invention of electricity and things like that, and you'd think that our lives would be better, but are they better? Many years ago, I watched a program on television, and I wish I could remember it or find anywhere where it was from. And it was a story of a man who came from an African tribe, and some like do-gooders came to his village and said, right, we're going to take you and we're going to emancipate you and bring you to America. And he was like, I don't know, fishing or whatever, he was foraging, and he had his life, and he had most of his time was free, and he got taken to America, and he learned how to read and to write, and he went to university, and it was great. But then he suddenly wanted things, and he wanted to have a home, and he wanted to have a computer, and he wanted to have a car. And suddenly, although he was in, first world, he somehow, to some extent, he had lost his happiness. And I heard a story that someone told me that, there was a man and he was fishing and he caught 10 fish a day, and he was like happy, and he basically worked for 2 hours, got his fish, ate one for his family and sold the others, and he had enough money to buy a bit of milk and apples or whatever he needed to buy, and he was happy. And then someone said to him, you know what, why don't you kill yourself, get 3 people to work for you, do that for 10 years, and then he goes, yeah, but look where I am now. And I don't know, I'm not, it's just something to think about, whether or not we have caused ourselves, I'm very happy with my mobile phone, don't get me wrong. I'm very happy that I live in a home where I can hopefully get shelter from the rain if we don't have leaks.
But modern medicine, when you think about people who are ill today compared to...
Of course, there's massive advantage. There's massive advantage in modern medicine. But I just wonder, what is the definition of being happy? And are we happier today because we have certain things? And then sometimes, people want things like, I want my next, whatever the word is, iPhone, the next shoes, the next bag, the next hairstyle. I don't know what it is. It's like are we ever happy? So I was thinking about Pirkei Avos. Oh, I was just going to say one more thing. Yeah, no, okay. About Pirkei Avos, the next thing is Ezehu Oshir, who is considered to be a person who's rich. Hasameach b'chelko, a person who is sameach, whatever sameach is, happy with their lot. And so that's obviously, if you are happy with whatever you have, then you are happy. Because even if I'm a multi-millionaire and I'm very happy because I've got the nicest house on the nicest block and I've got a plane, but I'm upset because I don't have a swimming pool. So all I want is a swimming pool. I don't have a flat in the south of France or in wherever else I want to have a flat or whatever it is. I don't have a helicopter, so I'm upset. Whatever the next thing, yeah.
I don't know whether I missed it, but when you were talking about the fisherman, the story continues that he builds up an empire and he employs lots of people and he doesn't have any time, and then he just says, all I want to do is be able to sit by the banks of the river and fish.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how he started,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what he's then yearning to do, to be able to go back to that. And I think he does in that story. He just gives it all up and then he appreciates the fact that he has got this time.
I know, but that's the idea of Hasameach b'chelko. If you think to yourself, this is what would I do if I had unlimited resources? I don't mean just financial resources. If I could do whatever I wanted with my time, whether or not a person would be happy to go back to where they were. Anyway, this is what I heard, this amazing idea. Hasameach b'chelko, a person who's rich, someone who is happy or joyful with whatever they have. Now you could read it in two ways, because the words in Hebrew is hasameach b'chelko, which means happy with his lot, okay? So I'm translating it as there, because it's more general, but with his lot, so you could say, I am happy that Danielle has what she has. I'm happy with the lot that you have. I'm not jealous that you have a nice car or whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? Or you've got a good job. If you're happy for the other person as well. One of my friends told me that. My friend Jeremy told me that last week. And I was like, that's really amazing. Obviously, it's important to be happy with the things you have, but also be happy with what everyone else has.
It's about external things. I mean, I'm sure I'm speaking for almost everybody here. Like on the 7th of October, it was just, we've been so affected by it.
Absolutely.
And for that first month, it was like I was in a daze. I mean, all I could think about was what had happened in Israel. So forget whether I'm happy with the fact I've got healthy kids and a loving husband, blah, blah, blah. I wasn't happy because I was just, miserable isn't even the word I can think of. It was a trauma that I still haven't got over.
I haven't got over it. I don't think any of us have got over it.
No,
And we're not even living in Israel.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we're not the ones whose family are taken hostage. I can't get out of my head. And that's definitely something that I was coming to. Yeah.
My son-in-law's cousin, the two little girls, they were hostage for quite a few weeks. They're home now.
I know, but the trauma and what their lives will be like afterwards is just like, think about how we're affected by that whole hostage situation and the whole 7th of October thing. And it's not, we don't live in kibbutz be'eri or,
Also in Israel, it's 24/7 on the news, which is for the adults.
But it's 24/7 on people's minds, because every week people have got a shiva to go to, or visiting someone in hospital who's been injured, whether it's physically or emotionally. Definitely. That's where I'm definitely coming to. Definitely going to get there. I just learned a new word in English about being happy for someone, not taking pleasure in someone else's misfortune, because maybe you've heard of the German phrase Schadenfreude, but I was like, there's got to be an English word. So do you want to know what the word is? I'm going to read it. It's called, and I hope I don't get it wrong, epicuricacy. There you go. You learned a new word. It's Schadenfreude in English. Epicuricacy. It's not on the sheet. I'm just telling you, I looked it up. Okay. And I was thinking, it's epicuricacy. Epicaricacy. It's taken me ages to practice saying it correctly.
How did you actually find it? What did you actually
I looked up, how do you say Schadenfreude in English? So if you can't remember the word. No, Schadenfreude is not being happy for somebody.
Being happy with someone's
Misfortune. That's what epicuricacy is. Being happy with somebody else's misfortune. So not only not be happy, like if somebody, like you're a bit jealous of because you think, oh, that person's got it all. No one's got it all. Let's just remember that. I keep thinking about like how important it is, like socialization and caring about the other. And I read something years ago in the Los Angeles Times, do not ask why I was reading it. My sister lives in Los Angeles. In 2016, you can look it up. A lady died in China. She was in a lift. The lift was broken. The people didn't come to fix the lift for ages, like maybe 3 weeks. She was in the lift. No one knew she went missing. And afterwards, the people, she got stuck in the lift and no one knew she was in the lift and the lift broke down. No one knew she was missing. And I'm thinking to myself, how is that person living that no one went to try and find her? And the people who lived in the building afterwards felt so bad because they didn't know, they didn't have any social interactions. What I want to tell you is the word Simcha in Tanakh, in the Bible, mainly in the Torah, is mainly in Parshas Devarim. In the book of Devarim is very rare in the rest of the Torah. It is in Nach, but very rare in Bereshis, and once or twice here and there. Lots of times in Parshas Re'eh. And I'd like to share with you something that the late Emeritus Chief Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Sachs writes about this. So in order to understand what he writes about it, we're going to look at a few sources in Devarim which talks about Simcha, about joy. And so the first one is 7, which it's talking about Va'achaltem sham lifnei Hashem Elokechem usamachtem, so the sin memches root samachtem, and you shall be joyful. B'chol mishlach yudechem atem uvatechem asher beracha Hashem Elokecha. You shall eat, this is talking about sacrifices before Hashem your God, and you shall rejoice, you should have simcha in all your undertakings, which Hashem, the Lord God, has blessed you and your household. It's not just in the singular you, it's and your household. Another one, Usamachtem lifnei Hashem Elokechem, atem uvinchem v'nosechem v'avtachem v'amosechem v'halevi asher b'sharechem. It has to be you with your sons, your daughters, your male slaves, your female slaves, and the Levites in your cities. Number 9, this is about korbanos. You shall eat them, you, your sons, your daughters, your slaves, your female slaves, the Levites, and you shall rejoice. Again, v'samachta lifnei Hashem. Only when you're with other people. This is where Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Sachs is going with this. And then we're talking about in Devarim, in Perek Yud Daled, v'achalta sham lifnei Hashem Elokecha v'samachta ata uveisecha. You and your household, not just you by yourself. Then on Shavuos, okay, the next one, v'samachta lifnei Hashem Elokechem. You shall rejoice before Hashem your God, your son, your daughter, your slave, your male slave, your female slave. And here we have v'hagev v'hayosam v'ha'almona asher b'kirbecha. Number 11 we're up to. The stranger, the orphan, and the widow in your midst. And then for Sukkos, v'samachta b'chagecha. For Sukkos particularly we have v'samachta b'chagecha. You, your son, your daughter, your servant, your maidservant, your female servant, your Levites, the stranger, the ger, the convert, the orphan, and the widows in your communities. So Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Sachs says the following in his, if you want to look it up, it's in Covenant Conversation and Collective Joy. Would anybody like to read it? Number 13.
Simcha is usually translated as joy, rejoicing, gladness, happiness, pleasure, or delight. In fact, Simcha has a nuance untranslatable into English. Joy, happiness, pleasure, and the likes are all states of mind, emotions. They belong to the individual. We can feel them alone. Simcha, by contrast, is not a private emotion. It means happiness shared. It is a social state, a predicate of we, not I. There is no such thing as feeling Simcha alone.
That's what Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Sachs says, and he proves it from lots of examples in Tanakh where it says Simcha with somebody else. Okay, this is what I found really interesting, and I especially underlined a little bit in case anybody would like to pass this on. If anybody's married and they would like to pass it on to their husbands, this is the halacha. Oh, she's seen the underline already. Okay, this is the halacha for the halachas of the festivals written in the Mishnah Torah by the Rambam, Maimonides, passed away about 800 years ago. And I kid you not, this is what he says. I should have made a magnet, but you can make your own magnet. If you're married and you want to stick it on your fridge, and if you're not married, you can still do it yourself, because apparently this is how people have simcha. Okay, so here we go. Source 14. Hakatanim nosein lahem kloyos ve'egozim umigod donos. For the young children, give them sweets, nuts, and roasted seeds. Call that, sour sticks. in today's parlance, okay? Or flake 99s. Okay, for women, v'hanoshim koneh lahem begodim v'tachshitim no'im lefi kafi mamono. According to your means, you should buy your wife, this is written to men, clothing and jewellery. And if you're not married, buy yourself clothing and jewellery, because apparently that's what women like. But if you don't like it, that's also okay, don't. But this is what the Rambam wrote. He wrote it more than 800 years ago. I would guess it's quite relevant today, okay? What do men need? V'hanoshim ochlim bosov v'shosim yayin. Men have to eat meat and drink wine. So there you go. A man's heart, to get to a man's heart is through his stomach, okay? Moving a few lines down. One minute. וכשהוא אוכל ושוסה חייב להאכיל לגר וליוסם ולאמונה עם שאר העניים והאומללים. When you're eating and you're having your festival, so you're having your Purim or your Pesach, make sure that you include people who are on their own. Now, the Rambam doesn't write this, but I would like to write divorcees, included singles, students, out-of-towners, because obviously that wasn't a word they had because they lived in little villages and things like that. I'm not adding to the Rambam, but I'm just saying in today's day and age, we have to be conscious. It's not just people who are converted or come strangers in our midst and orphans or widows. אבל מי שנועל דלסוס חצרו ואוכל ושוסו הוא ובנו ואשתו ואינו מאכל ומשקה עניים, and anybody who is busy making themselves a beautiful, beautiful party and they only care about themselves, them and their own family, and they only care about themselves, Ein zo simchas mitzvah. This is not celebrating a mitzvah. Elo simchas kreso. This is caring about your own stomach. This is like, I'm all right, Jack. I only care about myself. When we make a party, the only way to have simcha is to say to yourself, I'm including someone else. And I don't mean in a not a nice way. I mean in a nice way. Not saying, oh, you're my token person. I always have to have someone. That's just not the way to do it. But just say everybody's welcome, and within your capability, you can't give from an empty cup. Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Sachs, Zifron Racha, he in his article he spoke and he said somebody went to see the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 1968, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, and he went to see him and he says, and I'm just going to read what he says. He goes, I'm depressed, I'm lonely, I feel that life is meaningless. I try to pray, but the words don't come. I keep mitzvahs, but I find no peace. I need the Rebbe's help. It's not on the sheet, but you can look it up if you want. The Rebbe sent a brilliant reply without using a single word. He took the letter I, every time he wrote the letter I this, and he sent it back without saying anything. And I think it's like a bit ironic today that we have everything is called iPad, iPhone, everything's I. And I'm going to carry on. Source 15 is Jonathan Sachs. Anybody would like to read it? It's a nice little section if anyone doesn't want to do the whole thing. Hazel, do you want to do it? Okay. 15. If you want to read this in the original, just Google Covenant Conversation Collective Joy, you'll find it. Sorry.
What Moses is articulating for the first time is the idea of Simcha as communal, social and national rejoicing. The nation was to be brought together not just by crisis, catastrophe or impending war, but by collective celebration in the presence of Hashem. The celebration itself was to be deeply moral. Not only was this a religious act of thanksgiving, it was also to be a form of social inclusion. No one was to be left out, not the stranger or the servant, or the lonely, the orphan and the widow. Moses' insight remains valid today. The West is more affluent than any previous society has ever been. Our life expectancy is longer, our standards of living higher, and our choices wider than at any time since Homo sapiens first walked on Earth. Yet Western societies are not measurably happier. The most telling indices of unhappiness, drug and alcohol abuse, depressive illness, stress-related symptoms, eating disorders and the rest have risen by between 300 and 1,000% in the space of 2 generations. Why so? Our contemporary consumer is constructed in the first person singular. I want, I need, I must have. There are many things we can achieve in the first person singular, but one we cannot, namely Simcha. Because Simcha is the joy we share, the joy we have only because we share. That said, Moses before the Israelites
before the Israelites entered land.
Sorry, I missed the comma. That, said Moses, before the Israelites entered their land, would be their greatest challenge. Suffering persecution, a common enemy, united people and turn it into a nation.
Stop for a second. that's what made me really think about it, because I read this, and this is what I couldn't stop thinking about. Like, those first few weeks since the 7th of October, everybody was caring about everybody. You were collecting money for people. You were sending old socks or whatever to soldiers you'd never heard of. Someone you knew someone who was in a battalion somewhere. That was just amazing, how amazingly united we were. And how, as sad as we were, we all felt we are contributing. And in a way, contributing, I'm not saying, oh, I'm the lucky one, I'm just saying is all feeling like we're all together, we're all in this together. And I really felt that, everybody felt that. Everybody felt like I'm numb and I'm in a lot of pain, but I'm with everybody else, we're together. And that feeling of togetherness was amazing. And I think it's Rabbi Israel Me'alau, I don't want to be certain, he says, it's great, we know how to live together, we know how to die together, let's learn how to live together. Sorry, Hazel.
Can I just
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
you talk
sure.
about turning us into a nation. Well, because my younger son is at LSE doing a master's.
Must like it
And,
there.
yeah, but the thing, I mean, he lost one friend over what happened, someone he'd made in the first year, but as my husband said, better to find out what they're like now than...
Oh, he lost a friend over it. I thought you meant he lost a friend.
No,
over
he
it.
lost a friend over
Okay.
because... But it brought the Jewish students together. It really created a nation out of them because they just relied on each other so much. And my son organised a Friday night for everybody and reached out to those he didn't already know who were
That's
doing
amazing.
masters that year.
Well,
And I
that's
think
like
that
a
was
really
really
amazing
great.
byproduct of a terribly awful
but
situation.
But the sad thing is it made them realise that they had only each other to rely on, that so many other people they thought they could rely on, they couldn't. That's the other side. They felt they
I've
couldn't.
heard awful stories. Someone who's in
They couldn't.
dental school, no one wants to partner with her. You often have to do projects. They know she's Israeli, and they chucked her off the class WhatsApp group. And it's really, it's really not so easy to be in university right now because you know. Let's not go down the Harvard road. Okay, Hazel. Don't know where you're up to then.
Right, but freedom, affluence and security turn a nation into a collection of individuals, each pursuing his or her own happiness, often indifferent to the fate of those who have less, the lonely, the marginal and the excluded. When that happens, societies start to disintegrate. At the height of their good fortune, the long, slow process of decline begins. The only way to avoid it, said Moses, is to share your happiness with others, and in the midst of that collective, national celebration, serve God. Blessings are not measured by how much we own or earn or spend or possess, but by how much we share.
I think that's like, it's so moving. And he wrote that in 2019, and I know he's passed away since now, and I'm just thinking to myself, it's like he's written it for today. It's like literally like he's like, thank you, this is like perfect for right now. I want to tell you something about me. I was actually in America on October the 7th, and my daughter lives in Boca and she had a baby, and I went to America. So by the time we went to shul at 10 o'clock in the morning, it was already 5 o'clock in the afternoon in Israel, because when we went to bed, we didn't know anything. We left shul, nothing had happened. Went to sleep. By the time we woke up in the morning, it wasn't like people in Israel or England who just heard like snippets of information. I only found out about it when I got shul 10 o'clock in the morning. 10 o'clock in the morning, there it was already 7 o'clock in Israel. It was already 5 o'clock in Israel. People had understood the calamitous effects of what had happened that morning in Israel. And on that day, we call it Simchas Torah, but it was Simchas Torah in Israel, but for America and England, it was actually Shmini Atzeres. And on Shmini Atzeres, we were reading Koheles. And the rabbi in the shul where I was, it's called Boca Raton Synagogue, BRS, is a man whose name is Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg. I don't know if you've ever heard about him. He's an incredible, and I think to myself, that was a real test of like, how is that person a good rabbi? How could you speak on a day when you have prepared nothing? What have you got up your sleeve? You've got no computer.
Rabbi Levine, exactly the same.
But I'm just saying is, really, it must have been one of the hardest days because the rabbis all heard about it. And then you've got to think to yourself, we were going into Simchas Torah. So we were coming from shock, horror, and also lots of people, as I'm sure in this neighbourhood, there are people there who are Israeli, or people whose children are in the army, or people whose sons were in Israel going to the army because they got called up or they quickly knew they had to join their own battalion. And I kept thinking to myself, the first thing we did was we read Koheles, and the rabbi spoke, and he said, and then it became Simchas Torah, and he said, we have to have Simcha. We are going to, and it's going to be hard, and especially for the children, we're going to be dancing with the Torah. And it was like, And I'm sure you all had the same feelings. And I was in a very weird situation because I didn't really know a lot of people. I wasn't like in my comfort zone. I mean, obviously I made you know, I spoke to people there and I knew a few people, but, and I'd like to share something with you that Rabbi Goldberg said on that day. And he spoke about Koheles. And that's why I've got like this little part of Koheles. And he spoke about this. La kol zman va'es kol chefes. For every time there is, for every season, there's a season for everything, and a time, a specific time for every experience. And then Koheles, written by Shlomo HaMelech, says the following: a time to be born. I'm sure you know lots of songs like English songs like the birds, yeah. A time to be born. Do you know what I'm talking about? No?
Yeah.
Oh, so you all know that. Okay. So what I wanted you to do is just by yourself or with another person, look at the list of things that Koheles writes about. There's a time for this and a time for that. And I just spend 2 minutes reading it and think to yourself, what would you have added to that list? What do you think doesn't need to be on that list? What do you think, is anything strange? Do you think they're opposites? Do you think one side's like good things and bad things? Do you think the opposites that Koheles chose are opposites? Obviously, it's translated, so any translation is an interpretation. But have a little look around, and then we'll come back together in a minute. Okay, so, Gabriella.
Okay, so I do Orpan in this room every week. Right, so last week I'm thinking about the word lahadil, lahazin, and lahakshib.
Yes.
These all have very different meanings, don't they? So lahadil is to differentiate, time to differentiate between A and B, this person or that person, or a contrast. I'm thinking lahazin to really listen, to
That means put your ear.
to put your ear to something, and lahakshib to pay attention to. So these are like to reflect on what's happening in your life or in the world.
Thank you for sharing. Do you want to say the other thing you noticed, Gabriella?
Yes, because it says ve'et rekod, not ve'et lirikod.
Okay. Can everyone see that? It's on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down. It says, most of them say 8 laledes, because the infinitive is a time to be born, the 8 lamut, a time to die. But for line 5, it says a sephod, like from the word hesped, a sephod, there's a time to eulogize, yeah, and a time to dance. But it's not a time to dance, it's a time for dancing and a time for eulogizing. That's really interesting. All of the others, except for the very bottom line, are in the infinitive, a time to, a time to, a time to. But for that one, it's different. We're going to talk about that in a second. Anything else? Anybody else wants to speak about?
Why have we got a time to sew? I mean, it's sew S-E-W, so it's this kind of sewing. Why sewing exactly?
It's interesting. A lot of the things are interesting. A lot of the things are to do with building the temple. So, for example, a time to build and a time to destroy. There's a time when God decided this is the time for the temple to be destroyed, or a time when there's a destruction. It's interesting that sewing is on the list of things, but I think it's a creative activity. There's a time to build things up and make things, and it could also. It could also to do with. It could also be clothes for burial shrouds.
Yeah.
It could also be that. Yeah.
I've got one. I was thinking actually this morning. I was listening on Ynet, and they were talking about when will people move back, whether to the south or the north in Israel. And they said they need bitachon, and so they said, can anyone look in the dictionary and see what bitachon means? Because people think security, but he said actually in the dictionary it means without doubt.
Right.
Faith in the fact that it will be safe because you're in.
Yes, to be certain. So actually that is something you would want, to be in a situation where you feel you have no doubt.
I don't know if we can ever be in that
Also
situation.
a time to love. So does that indicate that in those days you would only love because you were introduced to your future spouse, and therefore your parents would decide when is the right time?
I'm not sure, but I think it's a time to love as opposed to a time to hate, because you would think that you always want to v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, always love everybody. But actually there is a time to say,
You like people.
okay, but I'm saying to you, there's a time when a person should actually say, I've got to distance myself from you. Sometimes being upset with someone is appropriate. I'm saying, if it's your child, you want to show them you're upset with them if they've done something that's upset you, but at the same time draw them close with the other side, like never to push somebody away. But there are times when it is appropriate to say, you're toxic for my life, and I have to separate myself from you. I do think that. It's a very surprising one. But a lot of these, a time to gather stones, a time to embrace, and a time to shun embraces is like, is there a time to shun embraces? But maybe, like you were saying with your son in university, sometimes the person who he was buddying up with 6 months ago is now not the type of person who he's got to keep next to. Okay?
It's just not like, it's not the individual, it's the bigger picture. So
Of course.
a time to love in general terms, and then a time to hate when it's the enemy. You haven't got a heart of hate when there's no war. You've got just time to give love. You
should know that I went to Israel. I went to Israel actually twice. I went in November and I went in January. And in January, I went to a place which was on the border. It literally is on the border of Gaza, Egypt, and Israel. It's like, I can't tell you, the border is like not even as far away from that side of the room to that side of the room. It's so near. There's a proper border, but it's there. And the people who lived in those areas, like Be'eri and Keren Shalom, they lived there. They called their place Keren Shalom. They wanted to live in peace. They took people who were their neighbours or across the thing, and they took them to hospitals. They let them come to their town. They wanted to live in a peace, and you want to say to yourself, I'm a peace activist. I want to, but then sometimes you can't live like that.
It's about the time to accepting and agreeing.
Well, from your words to God's ears, that we should get to a place where we can get to a peaceful resolution, and there should be a time where it says a time for peace, and that we should accept. I know, but I'm not a politician. I really don't know.
You're supposed to accept your now, no matter what.
Yeah, you're always supposed to accept your now, whatever what. But I think that it's easy to say that, but I'm not the person who's making decisions, and I wouldn't like to be that person making decisions, because quite frankly, I'm not going to say to the person who lives in Keren Shalom, move it back in there when their life is in danger, because the person who lives like 10 meters away is not in a position to isn't going to respect them. So this is what Rabbi Goldberg said on that day. So that's why I thought it'd be really interesting to look at it, and it's actually what Gabriella said. He says, why do we have Ace Safod, a time for eulogizing, and Ace Rakod, a time for dancing? Why is it Ace Lirkod and Ace Lisfod? And why do we have Ace Milchama and Ace Shalom? And he said, why do we have a time for peace and a time for war? But it's not a time to this and to that. Because it seems to be like Kohelet, Shlomo HaMelech is saying, there are times for different things, but we have to, as Jewish people, live in a constant state, like almost like the present participle of we are eulogizing now, like we could be at a levaya in the morning, but then we have to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves down, and be at a wedding in the afternoon. And when we are at that wedding, be 100% present and make it a really nice atmosphere. And I know a lot of people, I have two English friends, who their children got married, not to each other, but they got married the week, their wedding was straight after Sukkot, right? And they were like, should we make the wedding? Shouldn't we make the wedding? And it was like, you weren't allowed to have big gatherings. It was going back to like that COVID stress. So what they did was they just did it like outside in someone's garden or something with a very small amount of people and family. But the people who were at the wedding felt like, how can I be at a wedding when I know my next door neighbour is sitting shiva? It was like the most horrific sort of circumstance. And I think nobody feels that terrible tension more than, I don't know if you've heard of a rabbi. His name is Rabbi Doron Perez, who's the rabbi of Mizrahi. He's South African. He's probably been to England a few times. I've heard him speak. And he had one son who's still missing. His name is Daniel Shimon Ben Sharon. We should pray for his recovery, a safe return. They don't know where he is. He was in a tank on the southern border, and they don't know where he is. And that son went missing, and they had another son who got shot. And the son who got shot got taken back, and he's recovered. And he was supposed to get married straight after Yom Tov. And they were like deciding, should we make the wedding or should we not make the wedding? So what I've got is on my phone, so you can listen to the recording. This is Rabbi Doron Perez, in his own words, speaking about him trying to decide with his wife whether or not they should make the wedding. And what I've done is I've put over here three, if you can see on the sheet, there's 3 QR codes. The one on the extreme left is Rabbi Doron Perez, and if you listen to it, it's a 35-25. I'm just saying to you, if you want to listen to the whole interview, I definitely recommend it. It's so moving, and he said it 3 months ago, so it was really raw when he said it. This is him.
A lot of people have asked me, and again, I don't know how, I think these things just happen themselves, is how are you able to be genuinely happy and incredibly concerned and sad at the same time? How can you celebrate with one son, knowing, God forbid, what's happening with another son? I said, I don't know. I just know that in the laboratory of life, things happen that the mind can't always understand. Things often don't make sense rationally. All of Jewish existence doesn't make sense rationally, but it happened. Sometimes, but it happened. So it doesn't make sense, but it's happened. I don't know. But I can just say that I have seen that it is possible to hold conflicting thoughts at the same time, and to celebrate and to be incredibly concerned at the same time.
So what he did was they made their son's wedding. I don't know how they did it, how they had the courage to do that. So the son that got shot was well enough to get married, and they made the wedding, and they did it, I don't know, it was like still in October, I believe, and they made it, and it was just, I heard him speaking about it afterwards. It's just, if you want to read more up about it, it's absolutely, he's very, very inspiring. And the other person who I think is absolutely inspiring is Rachel Goldberg-Polin, and Stephanie's got that on her phone, she can take it off. Her son Hirsch was at the Nova Festival, and then she knows his arm got blown off, and she doesn't know where he is now. I'm sure you've seen her on lots of videos. She's American, and she lives in Jerusalem.
So we were
And she, just one
watching and saying like, oh my gosh, it's Moshe's daughter.
And so just one second. She's speaking about how she can feel joy when her son is not there. Okay, and this is what she says.
And, it was actual, true joy, thank God, because, something that's sad for me, and I was thinking of it yesterday, was, I just miss being happy. Like, I can't be joyful, and we've been getting such beautiful, unbelievable hundreds of thousands of messages from Christians around the world that I really wanted to give them a message each Sunday of Advent. And I was saying, I wish you joy, and I'm trying to think, like, how can I feel joy? And the way that I was able to do it is I was picturing Hirsch's wedding, and I was picturing her holding Hirsch's first baby, and so I was like creating joy, but I miss actual joy. Like,
that's what she said, so moving. But she also said when other people, hostages, were released, she felt so happy. That was like a fraction of joy. Obviously, her joy is not complete. And the other person, who I'm sure you remember, is Rabbi Leo D., who was the rabbi. He used to be the junior rabbi in Raleigh Close. And I heard this amazing story, which actually Rabbi Ginsburg, who's the rabbi in Raleigh Close, wrote in a Mishpacha magazine.
His sister is a member here.
Who wrote Leo D's sister? Yeah, I do. Yeah, I remember she went. They were doing a meal rota when she left unexpectedly.
And her husband was one of the Chatanim.
Anyway, so somebody called Matti Laufer, who davens in the shul where Leo D davens. Now remember that Leo's wife and her 2 children, they got shot in their car on a Pesach outing, and I think the girls died, and then she didn't yet die. Whatever. Anyway, it was on Chol HaMoed. So they had Yom Tov, they had the Seder night, and then it was Chol HaMoed, and then it was going to be Chol HaMoed, then it was going to be Yom Tov again. And of course, it's Hallel in Shul on Yom Tov. And this is the story that Matti Laufer wrote. And if you want to look at it, it's like the middle QR code. You can look at it yourself. It's not for now. I'm saying if you want to read the whole article. And he says, in the shul, you feel a complex between depression and joy. The chazan struggles to find the balance to respect the community atmosphere. He keeps breaking up. It's hard. He gets to Hallel. First stanza, not sung. Maybe the chazan doesn't feel up to singing. The next part, the second stanza, but Seis Yisrael Mimitzrayim, the chazan can't get up. I'm beginning to feel the mourning. I'm beginning to understand that we won't be singing Hallel this Pesach. Sadness and pain and real tears are with us. But at that moment, Rabbi Leo gets up from his seat and moves quickly towards the chazan. Rabbi Leo gently puts his arm around the chazan, hugs him, and whispers something into his ear. The chazan looks at Rabbi Leo and immediately begins singing that lifts the soul to lofty heights. Malacha hayom kisanos. From then on we sing. We sing together. What did Rabbi Leo tell him? I approached the chazan after the prayer and I asked him if he was willing to tell me what the rabbi said. And he said that Rabbi Leo D. whispered in his ear, make it joyous. And yes, it was. happy and a little sad, but mostly comforting. And I think to myself, where did that rabbi get the courage? And I think that what you noticed is we live at a time of safod and rakod. As Jews, we are always living that balance of going to a party and going to a shiva. And we have to be present at the party when we're at the party and dancing with all our might and being in a nice outfit and having, your makeup on and everything like that. And we also got to be when we're going to shiva. And I think nobody does that more than a rabbi of a community who's literally, that's their life cycle events all over. And I just, when I was thinking about Month of Adar, I was thinking like, how can we be happy right now? I know it's 4 months, but it's 4 months. And then like you have the numbers people write down. I think it's 135, 136 days today. And I'm like, 136, it's just so long. People, there's 134 hostages that we don't even know if they're dead or alive. We don't know. Now I heard a report today, maybe they're in. It's how can we be happy? Forget about our own little bubble about whether or not I'm happy if I don't have a leaking roof or I've got a nice car or I've got a new outfit. That doesn't give us happiness. I know lots of people, at the beginning, they were like, I don't want to go to the theatre. I don't want to go out for dinner. Then other people were like, no, we have to like force ourselves out. We have to. And even though we're not in October and November, I still feel we're in a very difficult situation. And the people who are lightly injured, I've got a friend who's got a son who's a soldier. He's been in hospital for 8 weeks. Now, he is going to be okay. And he had to have 8 operations and he's had a skin graft and now he's got to learn to walk in. I went to visit him when I was in Israel. His legs are so thin because he's got atrophy. He will be okay, but that's lightly injured. That doesn't even hardly get a mention. It's not like someone who's... And there are people who are injured so badly. We have to just pray for the safety of all the soldiers and the return of all the hostages very, very soon. And I think that when we have our moment of happiness and we have like the wedding, we have this idea that the chassan has on his, the bridegroom has put ashes on his head to remember, and we break the plate, break the glass at the wedding, because we think to ourselves, Imesh Gachech Yerushalayim, always at the back of our minds. And we also have to balance peace and war, because we're now at war, but we're hopeful for peace. We need to try and be in a place where we can have peace. And I have the great honour and privilege to have lessons every week with Rabbanit Racheli Frankel. I know perhaps you remember her son Naftali about 10.5 years ago. It was one of the 3 boys. And so she's our teacher. And I told her that I'm going to be talking about a Koheles. And she says, you've got to tell the people in your group this poem. You've got to tell the people in the group this poem. This is a poem written, it's a modern Hebrew poem, written by an Israeli poet. His name is Yehuda Amichai, and he writes in response to Koheles, saying there's a time for this and a time for that. This is not the whole poem, but I'm sure you can Google it, okay? And he says, Adam b'chayav ein lo zman, sheyeh lo zman lakol. A man in his life has no time to have time for everything. Ve'ein lo eis shetiyeh lo eis l'chol chayfetz. And he has no time to have time for everything. Koheles lo tzadak kasher amar kach. Koheles was not right when he said this. Koheles means Shlomo, or the book of Koheles. Koheles is one of his names. Odom sarich lisno v'le'ehov b'bas. A man, and I'll say a person, needs to love and to hate at the same time, the same moment. Ba'osan einayim livkos, ba'osan einayim lischok, with the same eyes to laugh and to cry. Ba'osan yadayim lizrok avonim, with the same hands to throw stones. Ba'osan yadayim le'asof osam, and with the same hands we need to collect them. La'asos ahava ba'milchama u'milchama ba'ahava, to love in war and war in love. So even though we're at war, we still have to love. Lisno v'lisloach v'liskor v'lishkoach, to hate, to forgive, to remember and to forget. L'sadeh u'lebalbel v'le'achol u'le'alkel, to arrange, confuse, eat and digest. Es ma she'hahistoria aruka osa b'shanim rabos ma'od, that which through a long history has been done for many years. And it goes on, the poem goes on, so you can look it up yourself if you want. But I keep thinking to myself, when we say the Hatikva, we say, Od lo avda tikvatenu. Hatikva but shnot alpayim, that's number 20. We say that the Israeli national anthem, we always have hope that we have never lost hope, and we must never give up hope that we will get to a time where we will have peace. And I was in Bournemouth a couple of years ago, and I don't know if anybody's ever been to Kingston Lacey. If not, I definitely recommend it. It's a beautiful country National Trust place. There's a picture which is in the bottom right-hand corner of the sheet, and it's a picture which Barack Obama wrote his biography on hope. And this is the painting. It's a picture of a woman who's blind, and she's got a lyre, L-Y-R-E, and it's got one string, but she's like still trying to play, because wherever we are and whatever we do, even though we're at a time when it's hard for us to have simcha, we always have to have hope. And I found this beautiful painting that an Israeli artist, she drew. I don't know if you can see it so clearly. It's a picture of a bride, but then you've also got this like other figure sitting in the darkness on the left-hand side. And I literally Googled a time to eulogize and a time to dance. And this, I think her name's Tamar Young, but it might be Jung. Sure, in our human eyes, it seems as if death and mourning are the complete opposite of joy and dance. But life teaches us that sometimes it is precisely from the heartfelt prayer that can emerge from the moments of darkness that a much greater salvation than expected becomes possible. In the painting, you can see a figure in the dark holding onto a bride, which is revealed in all her beauty. And I hope that we will be in a situation where, as the prophet HGSS says at number 19, Yovshu atzmosenu, our bones are dried right now. The Bnei Israel, the Jews, are going through a very difficult time. Va'avda tikvatenu, and we think to ourselves our hope is lost, and it's a very difficult time. And I can't see a resolution to this. I'm really hoping there will be one. But we are going to hope that, like the Hatikva is, Od lo avda tikvatenu, that we haven't lost our hope, and that we will be, and that we'll have the ultimate simcha of the time when the temple is rebuilt, and may that happen speedily in our days.
Thank you very much.
Lots to think about.
But it's true, the videos coming from Israel. You've got these soldiers standing there under the chuppah, getting married, and they are really simcha. You know, you can see that they're having these moments. They need to have that joy. Otherwise, they thought, what am I fighting for? Just to be depressed every day or the day. We need to have that sort of sense of hope, as you say. So you see that the people going out at the bar mitzvah still, I know, and